Hello and welcome to Blueprint for Efficiency, a webinar series hosted by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment. My name is Eric Plunkett and I will be your host for today's webinar on gamification. Before we get started, a quick word about our speaker series. The Yale Center for Business and the Environment is pleased to launch our 6th annual installment of Blueprint. This series of public webinars emphasizes the latest opportunities for energy efficiency. Through presentations from leaders in the corporate, nonprofit, and public-private arenas, we will explore energy efficiency through the lenses of behavior, policy, finance, and technology. Today's webinar will be on gamification. It's a fascinating concept that's gotten a lot of attention recently, but it is little understood. We have a great talk today with two speakers who approach the concept from slightly different viewpoints. Our first speaker is James Scarborough, a PhD candidate in communications research at Stanford University. His work focuses on the psychological effects of playing video games, particularly in a social context and with an eye towards behavior-changing aspects of games. Our second speaker is Yoav Lurie, founder and CEO of Simple Energy. Simple Energy is changing how millions of people consume energy by changing how utilities engage customers. The Simple Energy customer engagement platform leverages the power of game mechanics and the social web to change how consumers think about and act on saving energy. Last, we would like to remind our listeners that we welcome any questions you might have, and we will direct them to our speakers at the conclusion of the talk. You can type questions directly into the GoToMeeting chat window. With that, please welcome James Scarborough.
All right, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming today. I'm James Scarborough from Stanford University, Department of Communication. And I want to talk today a little bit about how video games have changed our perspective on energy efficiency. Now, in my past, I've done a lot of work on global climate change with NASA JPL, and more recently, I've been speaking to a lot of experts from supply-side industry, from federal government, from academia, and regardless of how you feel about climate change, pretty much everyone can agree that conserving energy is both a good thing and desirable. So the opportunity we have in front of us today is that recent estimates are that we can save about 20% of energy in our homes just by being more conscientious about turning off the lights, adjusting the thermostat, things like that. And if we are able to manage a 10% reduction, that's equal roughly to about a 25-fold increase in wind plus solar, or a doubling of our current nuclear power. But of course, this opportunity involves behavior change, and that's a really difficult thing for people to do. The engine of behavior change is information, and the better the information, the more we retain, the more relevant and timely it's going to be in situations where it can be applied. So the problem we have ahead of us here is that we spend billions every year in this country gathering information. We have this terrific smart sensor infrastructure that's going in, tons of information, but it turns out that energy information is very dull. The UIs are very complex. They don't really present the particular problems that we're experiencing in our homes, and the feedback is separated from behavior, and what you can gain from changing that is not obvious, even in the dollar sense, which is where a lot of people tend to focus their energy. Now here you're seeing a sample of energy interfaces that we've looked at that we find very informative, full of information, but they're lacking a little something. None of them are telling us exactly what it is we're supposed to be doing. They're just telling us what it is that we are currently doing. Now here you see exactly the opposite. These are a selection of games. Every one of these are interesting, directive, they're fun, they're informational. So these games are giving us something that the energy interfaces are not. So why do we think it is that games are going to help us with this problem? Well, there's been a lot of research on motivation, and it turns out that games give us multiple modes of motivation, both intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and that's done through virtual currency systems, social interaction, a variety of other things that are really, really motivating. good games, the ones that we really like and we love to play, are easy to learn. You can jump in and play them right away, but they're very difficult to master. They keep us on this challenge curve that is never too challenging to yield frustration and never too dull to yield boredom. And games have proven, people who play a lot of games have extra effects with their ability to filter visual stimuli, to place objects in 3D, several other effects that playing games has on our brain and our psychology. Also, engagement in the learning process. When we take learning content and put it into a game, it becomes much more engaging for most of the people who are playing. This is not just for kids, but for adults as well. Additionally, games have this proven ability for positive behavior change. It's working with kids with diabetes. It's working with cancer patients. It's shown that games and VR can help us to improve our physical activity. And I'm going to talk a little more today about how we've shown that games can help us with energy consumption. Now, some powerful game features that we think are very important are particular situated learning. So this is when you learn something from a game. It can't be in such an unreal context that it doesn't really transfer. So there's a term, social practice, that essentially means the skills that we learn in the game can transfer to real life. So when we are playing a game that is ostensibly imaginary, no real consequences, we can still transfer those skills to real life, but it has to be relevant situationally. Also, games give us this opportunity for role-playing. We can put ourselves in a role that we might not ordinarily have an opportunity to be in. And it gives us shared value, particularly in a social sense, where when we do things with other people and we do the same thing with other people either at the same time or at different times, it gives us social relevance. It means that the information, the knowledge, the skills that we gain can be shared with other people. You can talk with them about what you've learned. You can practice those skills with other people. It gives us social relevance. Some of the theories that we've evaluated as appropriate here are particularly experiential learning theory. And this means that people learn by seeing, hearing, and doing much better than they do by, say, reading or hearing a lecture. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Social learning theory. And while social learning theory has several underpinnings of when we learn, who we learn from, why it is we learn, it essentially says that people learn best in a social context. When you're with other people or when you're learning near other people with the similar content, that's when we're going to learn best. And self-efficacy theory. This is means the probability of doing something is based on the perception of one's ability to do it. For instance, if I feel like I can save energy, then there's a much higher likelihood that I'm going to exhibit behaviors that cause me to actually affect that outcome. And cultivation theory. Now, cultivation theory is more expressly about the media here, and it essentially says that media cannot make us do things that we're not inclined to do, but it can change the way we think about something or what we think about during our time. So those are some of the theories behind the work that we're doing at Stanford. Now, I'm showing here Taxonomy of Learning, and at the very bottom is knowledge, recall, discovery, observation. This is the things we do every day. And moving up, these are the lower level learning up to the higher level learning outcomes. Our comprehension, this is understanding what it is that we've learned, application, using that to solve problems, and then analysis, synthesis, and evaluation at the very top. And this is relevant in the following way. On the left here, the triangle you see on the left shows essentially the learning outcomes based on that taxonomy. At the very bottom, you get the least benefit from the remembering. This is what we see in a lot of exam-type situations where it's rote memorization. You don't get very much out of that. But as you understand, apply, analyze, you get a much bigger effect. On the right here is retention outcomes from various activities relevant to this. Most of the information we get on energy efficiency comes in the form of somebody telling us about it, us reading about it in a book or a pamphlet. We get audio-visual, maybe television commercials, public service announcements. But in the games, what we're getting here is way down at the bottom is the practice by doing. This shows a much larger average retention effect. Up to 75% of the information we gain while we're actually practicing is retained, and we can recall it in relevant situations in the future. Whereas if we just read a pamphlet or have someone else tell us about it, we're going to have a much smaller learning effect, a much smaller average retention over time. So I want to tell you about another taxonomy that we have here that's relevant, and that's a taxonomy of gamers. First type of gamer is what most of us think of as the average gamer, as the killer. A lot of game research is based on aggression and aggressive outcomes, and it turns out that this is not the average type of gamer. Average gamers are more achievers. They don't tend to appreciate the violence as much as earning ranks and levels and rewards. Now there's also the explorer. The explorer is the type of person that likes to play games because they get to see and do all kinds of different things that they may not have the opportunity to do in real life. And finally, the socializer. A lot of women fall into this category. And this is the type of gamer that they play games simply to have the social interaction, particularly later in life or on a large scale with folks that they may not live near. And so they get this opportunity to have a high level of socialization. So gamers in general are not exactly the people that we recall them being from years past. So it turns out that 2 out of 5 gamers are female. So that breaks a large misconception that most gamers are male. In Facebook games and social games, it turns out that 65% of those gamers are female. Average age of gamers in general is about 30, 32. And again, with Facebook games, average age is about 45. 65% of U.S. households play games, and nearly 100% of U.S. households have at least one device that is capable of playing games, whether it's a cell phone, a game console, a PC, or something of that nature. So this is much different than most people think of as the average gamer. There's also a new gamer generation. So for instance, highest grossing movie of all time is currently Marvel's The Avengers, $207 million for opening weekend. Biggest entertainment launch in history so far, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, almost twice that amount, 400 million in 24 hours, over $1 billion in sales so far. So this is big money that we're talking about. World of Warcraft, which is the most popular massively multiplayer online role-playing game, over 10 million subscribers paying $15 a month, and that game has made over 10 billion in sales over the now 8 years of its existence. There's also a new science of fun. As I mentioned, previous games research has focused largely on effective violent and aggressive content, but the new wave of research is focusing on how games satisfy basic psychological needs, the need for cognition, need for affect, need for belonging. All of these things are needs that all of us have in various degrees, and games tend to meet those, particularly in situations where folks may not have the opportunity in their everyday life to experience those things normally. Our work focuses on how games pique arousal and attention and keep us engaged. And this is really relevant to the learning process because, again, when we have that optimal level of arousal that good games bring, our learning is enhanced substantially. So the guiding concepts for us are to mix real and virtual. We want to use real behavior as a joystick for gameplay. We want to build professional games at scale so we can distribute these to the general population and fit current game trends, things from Zynga, other Facebook games. We want to stay true to game sensibilities. Even though the game goals are serious, we want to maintain the fun, the intervals, rewards, teams, high frequency of feedback, all of these sensibilities that we learn from games, we want to maintain in our software as well. So here again is one of these energy interfaces that I mentioned earlier. Very informative, information rich, but it doesn't give us any information about what we can do next. I'm going to show you an interface that's exactly the opposite in a way. Now this is a World of Warcraft raid interface. So this is when a player takes their 24 best friends and go to fight some kind of enemy. In this case it looks like a dragon or something back there. But the really relevant features of this screen that are interesting to us are in the lower left you're going to see a window that shows performance. That's these bars, starts with a blue bar and a brown bar and a couple of green bars. And so what this is telling us is, this is not only telling us exactly what our performance is. So for instance, if I was the player, this is telling me moment by moment, second by second, exactly what my performance is. And it's telling me the performance of all of the other people who are playing the game with me. And what this does is this gives me the opportunity to adjust my behavior to conform to norms or expectations of my group and myself. It also gives me the ability to evaluate other people's performance. For instance, at the bottom of that you see someone in red there who is not performing very well, and someone at the top in blue who's performing exceptionally well. What I can do as a leader is then I can say, hey, the person at the top, can you spend a little bit of your extra energy and help the person at the bottom? So as a community we can begin to perform better by helping each other, by teaching, by learning, all through this high degree of feedback. So this is something that we're trying to integrate into the game that we designed. We want to use these successful ingredients from games such as self-representation with avatars, feedback, particularly at a moment-to-moment level where we're used to having feedback at, say, once a year for a job or once a month for our energy behaviors. We want to enhance community connections. We want to use ranks and levels so that other people know and that we know how well we're doing, using teams, virtual economies, and a compelling narrative. Now this is something I think is really important for these games, is having them tell us exactly what it is that we've done, how that's contributed to the overall health and welfare of the community, and what it is we should be doing next to continue that trend. So we wanted to make a multiplayer game that connects our home smart meter with gameplay, track our real energy use, gives us feedback in the game, and links to social networks and mobile devices. And so we've done that, and here's our intro screen. One thing we're very proud of is this game is very professional looking. It was developed by a professional game company that's done several other games. We've got lots of good feedback that the game looks professional, plays professional, and people enjoy it very much. Now in the game, this is the dashboard where you can see how you're performing. Again, you see here the same type of graph you see in the other energy interfaces, but surrounded by these other fun, interesting things. So now I have a baseline of my energy use as well as what my consumption was yesterday, hour by hour. On the next screen here, this is the summary of how my real energy behavior, and I want to emphasize that in this game, the input to the game is real energy performance in your home. So as you reduce your average usage, you get a benefit in the game that gives you an advantage, so you get to go further and perform better in the game itself. Now here's one of the fast little arcade games that we've implemented. In this game, what you're doing is you've got 4 characters. Some of them are shadowed at the bottom, but you have mom and dad and son and daughter. And what they do is they run around the house and they have their daily tasks. Like in this case, mom wants to exercise. So what we need to do is make sure that the lights are on so she can move around the house, turn on the appliance for her, and when she's finished, we need to turn that off as well. So now what this is doing is, in a way that's very fun and unobtrusive, this is providing real information that we get from public utility databases, from appliance manufacturers, from other real information sources that provides real data about how each one of these appliances, we have several dozen appliances in the home here. We have plasma TVs, computers, video games, stereos, all of the kitchen appliances, and these are showing real data from manufacturers about how much energy these appliances use. And so while you're playing the game, this information is being fed to you in a very subtle way that is not boring at all and becomes very interesting because there's a challenge and a score associated with it. We also have real-life energy action challenges that give people an opportunity to test their knowledge throughout the game and reinforce some of the lessons and information that we've provided. And here you're seeing achievements. Now, as you play the game, as you become increasingly connected with your social network, you get these achievements. And achievements are for playing the game, getting high score, replacing the light bulbs in your virtual home, several different things that make the game more interesting and playable over a longer period of time. Plus, it's something that you can share with your friends and compare your achievements to theirs and get a sense of where you stand in the community. Excuse me. Now, for me, this is the most interesting screen because this shows us our social neighborhood. Now, beyond a leaderboard where you're actually looking at scores and ranks, this is a glanceable interface where I can, in just a matter of seconds, look and see how well it is that I'm doing relative to my other friends. Now, if I've been playing the game, you're going to see that there's some solar panels on my house. If I've been playing the game a lot, I'm also going to have a windmill. If I've been doing really well in the game, my house is going to turn green. So now it's really easy for me to determine how well I've been doing compared to my other friends and neighbors and social connections out there who are also playing the game. So some initial results that we're getting is 66% of the people that we've interviewed so far said they enjoyed playing the game very much. 85% of players report that they likely continue playing after the research period. And I think most importantly of all, 95% of players, without any kind of indication that it's actually working, 95% of players believe this game will actually work. Now again, back to the self-efficacy theory here, when you believe that something's going to work, you are far more likely to actually make it work through changing your behavior. So that's a really important outcome for us. And we're getting measurable change in real energy behavior, both in a lab study where we're trying to simulate situations in a lab to really control exactly what is happening there. We're getting measurable change there. And in the field study where we now have hundreds of subjects have played this game, and while they're playing the game, their energy use is going down significantly. So those are our initial results. And that's the end of my presentation, so thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to Yoav Lurie to tell us about what's going on at Simple Energy.
Thank you, James. So as I'm pulling up my screen, welcome all to this. A little background, and James or someone else, if you can just confirm you can see my screen, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm seeing that, Yoav.
Perfect, thank you. Simple Energy uses the lessons and tools of behavioral science, and much of which started in our fundamental focus and foundation in gamification. And we leverage those backgrounds, our backgrounds, and the backgrounds of those on our team actually reflect those, much like the folks at Stanford and James and his colleagues. And so we took the lessons of game developers and we said, how would we apply this in a real energy context with utilities as our customers? And what we do is Simple Energy motivates right now millions of people to save energy through our relationships with some of the largest utilities and most progressive utilities in the country. And we do this to enable those utilities to better achieve measurable and verifiable energy efficiency results, to increase program participation, to stimulate dynamic pricing programs, and to generally improve customer satisfaction. We want to change how people use energy at a massive scale and make sure that when we do it, both in an efficiency context and a time of use, peak load reduction context, that we do it in a way that's always measurable and verifiable so that we can demonstrate to our customers, who are utilities, that we're doing it appropriately. Now, on the foundation, I want to just set the stage really briefly. James did a great job of starting this from a very macro level. But in a utility context, we know that well over half of people said they would change how they use energy if they knew that it would save money or save the world. But of course, we know that fewer than 5% of people actually do anything. And in a widely pushed out and reported Accenture study has shown that energy has become back of mind for nearly all customers. As we look at how people spend their time, this year, more people will spend well over twice as much time on average watching the #1 movie in theaters as they will interacting with their utility. Certainly several orders of magnitude more in just about every activity they do. And as utilities, and as someone working with utilities, we know that the utilities around the country are giving messages to their customers that they want really specific results from. Reducing usage, changing out appliances, switching pricing plans, introduction to the benefits of smart grid. All the while, customers are engaging in the things, as James so rightly said, that we know they're going to spend their time in. If we look at how people actually spend their time online, something that really strikes us is that most folks don't spend their time in the places where utilities are making the most investment. I'm going to get back to this in a couple minutes in terms of the platforms on which we deploy our product, but most folks are spending their time in social, on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter, in that order, playing in games, in email, and then finally in this sort of minor part of their time on the internet, they're in portals, much like the portals that so many people in the industry have invested. When we take the concepts of gamification and apply them in the industry, we are left with, we try to focus on the underlying drivers. When we talk about game mechanics, we talk about behavioral motivators. One of those is supersized incentives, why half of all Americans will play the lottery this year. Social pressure, why we'll go to a school function, not at a pizza place, not necessarily because we want to go to that pizza place, but because we know that it's benefiting our kids' softball team, and more likely because we know all the other parents on our child's team are going to be there. It's why grown men at a Mets game will stand up and fight for a t-shirt that wouldn't fit them and that they probably won't wear anyway, just for the activity of getting something for free and for winning. We see this across all of life, and these really are the practical applications of the same undergirding behavioral psychology that James referred to in gamification. Games are so compelling because they leverage all of these behavioral functions and all of these truths in how people behave and act, and that they actually get them to work. Two categories of this that we actually have tried to put into practice are both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The intrinsic motivation are things like acceptance and idealism, community, social contact, and status. The extrinsic, these are rewards. These are something that you see much more visibly in life. These are cash, rebates, rewards, and prizes. So we actually leverage both the intrinsic, approval and status, and the extrinsic, rewards and prizes, throughout the programs that we deploy for our utility partners. So approval, we enable someone through the web application to post that as they see their own energy usage and their own energy savings, they can post that to their Facebook wall, they can publish it out to Twitter. Their friends can also come and like their profile, which posts to their wall. Here I'm liking Justin's profile, Justin Siegel, my co-founder here at Simple Energy, publishing that to my Facebook stream that I've liked it, thereby encouraging him to do it. Status, we have leaderboards throughout the application, which are not just strapping a leaderboard onto a web portal. We have to be very mindful, and James got to this a little bit, but as we think about gamification, gamification is not just taking your existing web application and trying to strap on a Facebook like button. A like button does not a social engagement experience make. Rather, it's building from the ground up an application that's rooted in social and it's rooted in behavioral science. We give folks rewards, both virtual and real-world prizes. Many of our applications actually enable, many of our programs enable people to win prizes, such as a personal computer like an iPad or another tablet device, or for themselves, or as part of a team to win up to $25,000 for a local school. All of this, by the way, is based on their actual energy behavior in their household. So if they saved on a peak day, or if they saved energy writ large to achieve an efficiency result, or if they signed up for a utility program and took a transaction, like a refrigerator swap out, or signing up for an e-bill. All of these are ways for them to get points and entries and really drive the behavior that the utility is trying to seek. 3 lessons that we think are incredibly valuable that we've built in throughout our applications, and that no matter whether your utility works with someone like Simple Energy or tries to do it internally, we would encourage you to use, are to ensure that everything you do is personal, actionable, and ubiquitous. When I say personal, it needs to be specific to me. It needs to be relevant, highly targeted, and contextual. It's actionable in that it's a real-world action that we can then create a feedback loop. Many of the studies James pointed to speak to the feedback loop. Those achievers James talked about are folks who are wanting to do something in the game environment and then immediately see the results. And so if we give a user or a customer a tip about something they can do, we then need to close the loop with them and tell them how they actually did. How did that light bulb swap out, or changing the temperature on your thermostat? How did that affect you? And not 30 days later, but in a much more real-time way. And then finally, it needs to be ubiquitous. Remember that slide that I showed you just a few minutes ago of how people spend their time on the web? Well, we need to make sure that we're not expecting our customers to come to our web portal. We have to come out to them. We have to go to the places where they're spending their time. And that means email, it means Facebook, it means more and more on mobile and on the web as well. So just a little bit on where we've actually put this into practice is we built a platform that utilities leverage to better engage their customers across all of these media. So in the web portal, on mobile applications, on social, on messaging, all of which are white labeled using the utility brand name and going out as an opt-out program to utilities. I want to show you a couple from one of the programs that one of our customers has talked about extensively. These are public on the web, so I can share them freely. But here in San Diego Gas and Electric launched the San Diego Energy Challenge. If you go to the full website, you'll see their logo at the bottom of the page. Like I said, it's a white labeled product. But here we're allowing customers to win prizes by saving energy. These prizes can go and the energy activity they take in their homes can go towards winning prizes for themselves and also for earning points that will help their local school to potentially win cash and prizes. So here on the dashboard, I can see how I'm doing relative to others, both in my household. I can add folks to my household, and to see how my team is doing. I get a feed that shows me how others are doing and updates me. All of this, again, is connected through Facebook and built in through Facebook and Twitter and other social networks, but also I can access it independently via email and add my friends one by one for those folks who are less comfortable adding it by Facebook. We then engage customers by email, and these are highly targeted emails. One of the key things about making something personal and ubiquitous is that we need to, on the back end, as folks who are both as utilities and providers of software to utilities, ensure that we use all of the data at our disposal, both data about that individual customer, data about their house, data about the weather, and ensure that we are delivering to them a timely, appropriate, and meaningful insight in that moment. So what we do here at Simple Energy is we take thousands of pieces of data about our customer set, compare them with one another, and deploy a personalized message every day. So every single user who gets a different message gets a message that day that is personal to them, and that will drive their specific usage. So how's it going? And finally, we launch, in every case, a custom and white-labeled individual mobile app that's live and usable to that utility's customers, that leverages real energy data and enables all the features that we enable off the website right in the customer's hand and pocket with them at all times. We've got incredible responses for this, and people who now are able to close the loop really easily without having to go log into a utility website, but actually just pull it out of their pocket and see how that change they did yesterday actually affected yesterday's usage. So how's it going? I said that we do three things. We engage customers much more and much better. As we look at the open rates and click-through rates of our emails, they're far ahead of where many industries are, and as we've seen anecdotal utility data, much, much farther ahead of where many of our peers are in terms of getting people to open emails and getting them to respond and to click through emails. Much of the challenge of this 6-minute-a-year problem is simply getting people's attention. And so by engaging them around specific motivations that we know that individual customer will respond to, we're able to drive their usage, their engagement way up. We also have been able to get, and these are very initial results, not yet independently verified or published, though we're soon to have that, results around energy efficiency, and even more dramatically, though I won't share them with you today, but stay tuned and follow us on Twitter, we will be publishing them shortly, are the peak demand reduction results that we've had. We think that we have some of the most compelling and engaging statistics around actual next using gamification and behavioral motivation to drive massive day-ahead demand response-like energy savings from people in some of the hottest and highest usage days of the year. And finally, one of the things we always come back to and where we always like to both start and end our conversations with our partners is how did this actually change customers? And what is the actual human face of this interaction? Because customer satisfaction and the end customer is so deeply critical to our success in this industry. And two examples of that, Josephine here said that every time she saw that other people on the leaderboard were saving more energy than she was motivated to save even more. She saved over 34%, not because we got her to care more than she used to about saving energy, because she's always cared about saving energy. And not because we got her to care more about saving money, because she's always cared about that. But what we did was we got her to act as if she cared. We took these gamification principles and leveraged her underlying commitment to actually want to do something and drove her to action. This is not dissimilar from tools used in healthcare and smoking cessation, in getting people to go to a gym and getting people to do all sorts of altruistic behavior, leveraging the behavioral, the undergirding behavioral mechanics. We were able to get her to take on and do much more. And finally, Linda here had a fundamentally better attitude towards her utility and finally felt like they were working with her and not against her after being exposed to a real program that engaged her around both real data and real motivation that encouraged her to save energy. Again, this is Yoav Lurie with Simple Energy. We're working with utilities around the country to motivate their customers using game mechanics to save energy right now, tomorrow, and in the long term.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much both of you for the presentations, and we've had a number of questions come in, so let's get started. This one is for James. Energy seems for energy consumption of heating oil, propane. I'm cutting it out. We're happy.
Yeah, you're cutting loud.
All right. Does that sound better now?
Oh yeah, much better.
Much better. Okay, excellent. So I will start over on that question. This is for James. Focusing solely on electricity seems to ignore energy consumption of heating oil, propane, and natural gas. Does a game which focuses only on electricity distort who is really using energy and how efficiently they're doing so?
Yeah, we're certainly, in our current version, we're certainly leaving out not just the folks who are using those alternative fuels to fuel their home, but folks, pretty much all homes across the country are also using gas in addition to electricity. So we have methods that we believe can apply to those other sources. We have ways of measuring those energy sources that do not depend on utilities, like TED 5000 devices and things like that that you can add to your home. So it's certainly possible to include those audiences, but our current research is just focused on electricity.
And I should say this is Yoav at Simple Energy. We actually are working both with electricity and gas and home heating oil, and actually starting in the next year launching in water as well. The key differentiator there, though, is the access to data. In order to provide a real compelling customer experience, we need to be able to access real customer usage data of any of these various resources.
Okay, great. We have another question. This is from Judy, and I believe it's for Yoav. How do you prevent utility customers from eventually losing interest in the game? You've only been doing this for about a year or so, at least the one slide showed that.
Right, that's a great point. So it's critical that we maintain customer attention over the long term, and as Judy rightly notes, we've been at this just a little over a year or so. What we're finding is that for many folks, leveraging some of the initial heightened points of gamification, such as supersized incentives, serves as a very good campaign to integrate them in the program and to initially engage them. And then over time, we continue to add value with specific points of re-engagement. So while it's likely that someone's actual level of attention will wane over months, that's actually not a bad thing. And I mean that in a very specific way. Much of the results that our utility partners are seeking is peak energy savings. And for that, if we can consistently re-engage customers in the hottest or in the highest energy use parts of the year, then even if in some of the more temperate months where energy use is less critical in the spring and fall, their attention drifts elsewhere, and the frequency with which we engage them goes down. If in those critical months we're able to consistently re-engage them, which now over the course of 2 summers we've been able to demonstrate we have, we're able to mediate that. So in actuality, as an industry, we shouldn't be thinking about how do we engage people all of the time. We should be thinking about how do we engage people in the moments we need to engage them, which is at the moment of sign up and at the moment where real energy savings needs to happen the most. In many ways, we take our inspiration in that particular vein from some of the most successful weight loss programs in the country. And many of those have an initial challenge. I'm thinking of Weight Watchers, that enable people to reach a lifetime goal, and then they give them a lifetime account, which they can then, and a lifetime membership, so they can continually come back over time. And then right about the holidays, they send them additional messaging saying, you know, you really should come 2 weeks before Thanksgiving in order to reinforce the messaging at the moment that they know people will flip. And so what we do is we move people's energy use dramatically, and then we establish a new normal. And then we continue to re-engage them in the moments that it matters most.
And another point here is that this is a problem that the entertainment software industry has struggled with throughout its lifetime. And for instance, you'll see an example of Zynga games where they had ostensibly the most popular computer game of all time, Farmville, between 75 and 90 million people playing this game. It lasted about a year. And what they did is they just introduced Cityville and then Frontierville and Castleville. And so we see this design process as iterative. As Yoav was mentioning, it's important to engage people at the critical moment where their behavior change is most effective for them and for the community. So this is an iterative process. Other games like World of Warcraft have addressed this through episodes. And so what happens is you have this game that during the holiday season you have an event that draws people back in. You have a giveaway where you can, another prize comes up that's bigger and better than before, or you have something that is themed for the holidays. And that tends to re-engage people in the process. So the maintenance of this is, it's a an iterative process where you really want to be designing new stimulus, you want to have a new version, you want to have a different fantasy context, a new way to engage the customers. So I think that's another way to look at this problem. And you know, a lot of entertainment companies have dealt with it very effectively through that way.
All right, great. Next is from Jimmy, and it's for James. Can one hit a wall in the Powerhouse game, or is it possible to keep playing forever? For example, what happens when a household makes all the feasible efficiency upgrades and behavioral changes, or they unlock all the achievements?
Yeah, so this is one of our design principles is to have a game that is very long playing. It means that you can play for a while, it's very interesting, but you can step away and then come back to it, and there's still lots more to do. This again goes back to what I was saying a moment ago, where as the game matures, as the platform for behavior change matures, the developers have to keep adding content, keep adding incentive, add more achievements, add more appliance upgrades, make sure that if folks take a break and walk away for a while, that when their social circle comes back and says, hey, we missed you, we want you to be back in the game with us, that when you come back there's all kinds of new things to discover, new stimulus, new reasons to get back into the game. And again, that's an iterative process. Designers have struggled with this for a long time. And it turns out that when, like a television series, if you think about other media, it doesn't really get stale over time. What happens is they change the plot, they change the characters. In our case, we're planning to add more games so that it's not just the one game, it's not just the energy challenges, but now you have a game that maybe is a commercial type game where you're running an office building like SimCity or Sim Building, and then maybe have a zoo-like game where you have animals, and then later have a pet game where you have a pet that you're trying to develop. So by adding these elements iteratively and continuously, we think that while there will eventually be walls, what happens a lot of the time is power gamers are going to go straight through to the end of the game because, like the achievers, they get to throw their arms in the air and say, hey, I beat the game, I won. But what we're trying to do is make that a temporary state where the I win situation is very temporary, and as the new version comes out, as the new content comes out, people have to say, oh, hey, now my friends are ahead of me again. I have to go compete with them and catch up with the curve that I like to stay ahead of. So the process of that is it's an ongoing process. It's not something that you can publish once and have everybody do it endlessly.
All right, here's a question for Yoav from Susan. Are any utilities trying to reach commercial customers, and do you work with non-utility local government partners?
So, hi there, Susan. Thanks. It's a great question. We do have utilities that are attempting to reach specifically small commercial customers. What we find is that in the largest industrial customers, many of the changes that need to happen need to happen on a system, on a building-wide basis, and in the biggest users, and also they'll have an energy manager. Where this is the most impactful is in a small commercial setting, where many of the changes that can happen and that can have the biggest impact are happening based on behaviors that can happen. This is often in a commercial kitchen or in in maintenance of specific pieces of equipment. And so when that exists and we have the data, we're certainly able to accomplish that behavior change with commercial customers. And in many ways, in a commercial setting, we're able to do it even better because there's a much clearer profit motive and often a chain of command where an owner is able to get employees motivated and leverage tools, or where a chain owner of a chain of restaurants is able to get individual franchises to take action. As to whether or not we work with governments and municipalities, certainly municipal utilities are great partners for us and are often motivated, some of the most motivated to engage their customers, and we love to work with them. Working with a municipality that's not the utility, would really need to have the connection to the utility insofar as gaining the utility data. Much of what we do is serving the utility's needs and leveraging the utility resources, which includes individuals' home energy usage data. Without access to that data, it's hard to provide that really compelling feedback loop. And so while it's certainly feasible, it's not a rich customer experience that you could have with getting access to the data. So certainly reach out to me, Yoav, at Simple Energy, and we can continue the conversation. But one of the prerequisites for any of our engagements is access to home energy or small commercial energy usage data.
All right, here's a question from Steve that I think applies to both of you. Are there any games being geared specifically to school-age children to get them to start learning energy conservation at an early age and make it something they can bring home to teach their families?
Yeah, this is James. So part of what we did with our game is we tested it on various audiences, starting with middle school kids, high school kids, and college age as well. And it turns out that everyone that we've tested the game with so far has enjoyed it, but for drastically different reasons. And for the middle school kids, they really enjoyed playing the game because it was fun and interesting and something that they could get a handle on right away. High school kids really loved the social comparison, and then the adults and beyond enjoy the fact that they're learning and actually changing their energy behavior and saving money. So I think various games do appeal to a broad audience, but for much different reasons. So, Yoav, do you have a different answer?
Well, so we initially targeted homeowners and people who are the primary energy bill payers. So actually, and we were expecting that our primary users would look a lot like your average social game user. So our average user is a 39-year-old woman. Many of our most active users are female. They tend to be between 30 and 50 years old. They tend to have a college education. So, but what we've been really pleasantly surprised by is how many of our users, regardless of their own demographic and age, have engaged their school-age children. And so we've received back dozens of letters and testimonials from children who have become the home energy czar and are playing the game sort of on the lap of mom or dad. And so they're engaging in their home energy use as part of a family that's now having a much more proactive conversation about how we use energy. And so we've been delighted to see that, even though the initial audience of our applications was not intended to be children. It's been great how parents have been using the games and the activities to better engage their children. We've been inspired by that.
All right, here's another question.
Something else, this is James.
Oh, sure.
Something else that's been happening for us. Oh. Sorry, I just wanted to follow up with something Yoav was just saying. So as the younger kids are playing our game, they go home to their families, and because they want to be competitive, they become the gatekeeper, where they go enforce these rules on everyone. And the household, which is our unit of analysis, saves energy based on just the one person playing the game. So this is called the gatekeeper function. And it seems that playing the game has that effect, and that whoever's playing the game becomes that gatekeeper and causes the whole family to change their behaviors. So it's an interesting effect that we weren't anticipating either.
All right, excellent. Another question that I think could go to both of you. Can you speak to the specifics of how you initially get people to engage in the games? You know, have they found that the people who are playing these games are already gamers in other parts of their lives, or is it people who are new to gaming?
So I'll take that. This is Yoav at Simple Energy. We work with our utility partners directly, and so we actually, as I said, and for those in the industry, you know what this means. It's an opt-out program. So our partners actually give us a list of their customers, both their email addresses and in many cases their physical addresses, and then we message to them directly that they're already enrolled in this game, that if all they do is save energy, they will be able to win prizes. In fact, if they want to do more, like compare against their Facebook friends or further engage, they can certainly log on, and many people do. But if all they do is just open their email, which many and nearly all of them eventually will, they're already in. And so if you have electricity and your utility has your email address or even your home address, you're in and you're already signed up. That makes customer acquisition or user acquisition for us really, really easy. And then what we find is that because we're engaging them in that way, most of our users do not actually identify themselves as gamers. Though I would say that I know many people who spend hours trying to build the perfect Excel spreadsheet, and while they would not classify themselves as gamers, and we wouldn't call building the perfect Excel spreadsheet fun, what they're doing is actually leveraging some game mechanics in trying to perfect that so that they can share it with their colleagues and get the social benefits of it. So even though these people, many of the users would not identify themselves as gamers generally, we're confident because most people exhibit some kind of game-like behavior in how they motivate themselves, that in some other way they are responding to game mechanics throughout life.
Yeah, and this is James. Most of the folks that we have playing our game, they've come to us. We have a small set of people that we've recruited for course credit or other types of credit, but the vast majority of people are just personally interested because they have no other way of sort of learning how to change their own behavior. As I mentioned early on, everyone that I've talked to and all the people I've interviewed, they're interested for one reason or another in conserving energy. But most of them simply don't know how to do it. They don't know what they're doing wrong, and they don't know what methods are available for them to conserve. So because we say in our advertising, this is fun, you're going to learn, and you're almost certain to change your behavior because of it, people are coming to us. It seems like there's a huge demand on the consumption side where people really want to have this. They really want to know how to do this, and they're looking for ways. And everything that's come before us is just not motivating, not interesting, or just really dull because of the complexity and the volume of information. But we're having really good success because gaming is fun. And at this point, I'm not sure I could find someone who is not a gamer. As Yoav was mentioning, I think as a species, we game pretty much anything that we can game. Now, the definition of game in this context is trying to play something pretend or imaginary that doesn't have real-life consequences. And so I think gamification in general plays on human nature and draws in people that have some motivation to enjoy this process and to learn everything they can and be successful. So that's our perspective.
All right, we're approaching the hour mark, but there are still plenty of people joining us, so I think I'll go with two more questions. First, one from Josh that says, as an avid gamer, some of the most rewarding experiences I've had have been working collaboratively with a group of strangers to overcome a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Do you think there's a role for cooperative techniques in games for catalyzing energy savings as opposed to, say, just pure competition?
This is Yoav.
Yeah, this is James. Go ahead.
Thanks, James. Just really briefly, we do see this, and we actually see it often. We initially saw it beyond the scope of our own platform. We saw people having very engaging, rich conversations in social media channels with their peer group about how to save energy and giving each other tips. We're now formalizing that and actually building that into the platform directly so that people are able to provide insights and tips to one another and to give each other motivation. This is a highly curated form, but enables this peer-to-peer sharing of ideas and tips. It also speaks to some of the things James said about the ontology, the modalities of learning and who the end user trusts. And in many cases, getting a piece of information from someone like me will be more compelling than even getting it from an expert if I don't perceive that that expert is necessarily like me. And so we found that opening it up to allow strangers and friends to give input and tips and suggestions and personal anecdotes and stories actually increases the rate at which people do energy savings activities inside their own home.
That's great. Thanks, Yoav. And this is James. We've actually got some other research that we're doing through Facebook and associated platforms through the social network that people have already built and associations that are built into Facebook, where we have pre-existing affiliations. And when you challenge a team versus another team, the pre-existing teams, people's motivation goes way up, not just to change their own behavior, but and this may or may not be good, to find other members of the team who are not performing and put some pressure on them to perform. Like, for instance, we have one project that's doing schools, so it'll be Yale versus Stanford, and everyone who is affiliated with either of those organizations who's part of this, their energy behavior feeds in, and it's a collaborative effort. And so we're finding some pretty strong effects, which we're still interpreting, as to what happens when you put people in this high-pressure situation. Does it cause a positive change, or does the criticism and pressure that yields, is it all beneficial? But we're getting some pretty strong results in that.
All right, excellent. So for our last question, we've got a number of questions that are more or less about where are you going next?
Is that for both of us?
For either of you, yeah. So what's the next step for Simple Energy or for Stanford's communications research?
James, if you want to start.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So for us, we are, again, we're interested in iteration and further development. So what we're doing is we're taking individual aspects of the game. We're looking just at the social comparison. We're looking just at the glanceable interface, leaderboards, self-representation. We're taking those individual elements and we're beginning to compare them with each other and with the lack of those to see which ones are the most powerful. We're also pursuing things that we haven't included in this version of the game, and we're testing each individual component and trying to find the most powerful ones that motivate people to be engaged, to increase their attention, to change their behavior. We're taking a lot of research that's been done in the virtual reality lab at Stanford, that's been done in psychology and education, in computer science and other research centers, and we're using that as feedback to our own research process. And so what we're doing is we're trying to outline essentially a blueprint for future development. So the game that we've developed is working, but we're always looking for ways to improve it. So if we use 3D animated avatars, is that going to increase people's motivation? If we use a female avatar versus a male avatar, all of these are aspects that could enhance the experience, they could enhance the learning, the acquisition of knowledge. And so we're going to continue to press those issues one by one until we believe we've explored virtually everything. Now, additionally, we're looking at commercial applications. Games in the workplace is a big issue. We're looking at other areas, not just energy behaviors. We're looking at health behaviors, medication regimes, diet and exercise, disease maintenance, other things that I had mentioned earlier. So we're looking at various not just elements of the games, but we're looking at other areas that could benefit from these fun and interesting ways to engage people in content that might otherwise be really boring because it's too complicated or too easy. So we're looking at both ways to approach this.
That's James, that's exciting stuff. This is Yoav, and I'm eager to see where your research evolves, because so much of our work is built on research of your lab and labs like it. Here at Simple Energy, we're expanding how the results that we have in terms of saving energy, achieving efficiency results, and particularly next day peak energy savings. We're doing this in two ways. One is by expanding simply the number of utility partners we have and rolling out our platform to more and more people. This is a huge way of getting to many more people, and we're certainly interested in partnering with more progressive utilities who want to get measurable and verifiable results using these tools. And second, we're constantly iterating and A/B testing our platform. So every one of our emails is sent in multiple formats within every specific demographic. So as I mentioned, every email is custom targeted, but then within each target set, we're constantly iterating and A/B testing and competing different ideas and approaches against themselves. The same with our mobile applications and with individual features, which we roll out to some customers first and then to others depending on the efficacy. And this is all regressed back not just to the efficacy of the open rate or the click-through rate or the number of clicks or the time on site. Those are all the internal metrics, but fundamentally we regress back all of the changes we make in the platform back to the energy usage of the individual customer, and then reincorporate into our platform and product the best and most effective tools. So we'll run experiments with one utility partner that then allow us to learn about something that's much more effective, do that in real time, and then roll it across the platform through all of our utility partners so everyone gets the benefit of the learning from an individual test. And we're doing that right now across utilities across the country, and excited to work with more of you all.
All right. Well, that concludes the presentation for gamification. Thank you, James and Yoav, for joining us today. And to all our listeners, in the coming months, we'll continue.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, no problem. Just know that we have some more webinars coming up next week on Thursday, February 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern. We have Kevin Kampschroer and Judith Herwagen from the U.S. General Services Administration, and they will be presenting on lessons learned for energy efficiency behaviors in buildings. So that concludes today's presentation. Thanks again for joining us on Blueprint for Efficiency.